Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/sportsmastery. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. Again, I want to welcome you back to Sports Mastery. I want to welcome you back to the Sports Mastery podcast. This is episode 32, How Successful Athletes Think. Show notes, links, conversation, and more at sportsmastery.com/How Successful Athletes Think. The overall theme of this show is learning to think different. Within this show, we're going to look at why you should question popular thinking. We'll define what popular thinking is. From there, we'll look at the question, why you should question the acceptance of popular thinking. That'll lead us to a quote. Popular thinking sometimes means not thinking. You will also learn in this episode that popular thinking offers false hope. Popular thinking also brings only average results. And we'll close out with how to question the acceptance of popular thinking. And one thing you should always remember, think before you follow. In today's show, we're going to be questioning popular thinking. So let me ask you this. What are you thinking before going to bed at night? What are you thinking before class? What are you thinking before your training session? What are you thinking before team practice? What are you thinking before you do your homework? What are you thinking before a recruiting visit? You see, what I want you to be thinking about right now is this. Popular thinking is too average to understand the value of good thinking. Popular thinking is too inflexible to realize the impact of changed thinking. Popular thinking is too naive to recognize the importance of realistic thinking. Popular thinking is too undisciplined to realize the power of strategic thinking. Popular thinking is too trendy to embrace the lessons of reflective thinking. Popular thinking is too uncommitted to enjoy the return of bottom line thinking. So what I want you to understand, if you want to become a good thinker, then start preparing yourself for the possibility of becoming unpopular. What I mean by that is, when was the last time you questioned a so-called leader for showing up late to a training session? When was the last time you questioned a so-called leader for missing practice or missing training? When was the last time you questioned one of your so-called leaders for missing a class? When was the last time you questioned one of your so-called leaders for missing a game? If you want to become a good thinker, then start preparing yourself for the possibility of becoming unpopular. So what are you thinking about when you go on a recruiting visit? What are you thinking in terms of how you're going to interact with the assistant coaches? What are you thinking about in terms of your strategic plan to interact with the high school coaches? What are you thinking about when you put a plan together to interact with athletes on that team? Because great athletes, they question popular thinking. I'm not an answering machine. I'm a questioning machine. If we have all the answers, how come we're in such a mess? Douglas Cardinal. So if you're thinking about schools and visits, I wouldn't be so caught up in thinking about the name on the building. I would be thinking about if this is a right fit. I would be thinking about, is the coach the right fit? I would be thinking about if the current juniors, seniors, sophomores, and freshmen are the right fit. I would be considering if the distance is the right fit for my family to come visit, or how easy it would be to fly home. I would be thinking about how easy is it going to be for me to stay in close proximity or contact with my support group. Economist John Maynard Keynes, whose ideas profoundly influenced economic theory and practices in the 20th century, asserted, "The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping the old ones." So what I want you to consider is that going against popular thinking can be difficult, whether you're a business person, athlete, pastor, instructor, or new coach for that matter. So some of the ideas that I'm sharing with you today, they go against popular thinking. If you value popularity over good thinking, then you will severely limit your potential to learn the types of thinking encouraged by this episode today. I've given you some broad reasons for questioning the acceptance of popular thinking. Now allow me to be more specific. Popular thinking sometimes means not thinking at all. Let's take the recruiting visit. let's say you're an athlete going down to visit Oregon State on a football recruiting visit. What's going to happen? You're either going to go down on a Friday night or Saturday morning, or you're probably going to get there Saturday morning and leave Sunday. And what's going to be entailed is you're going to have a hotel room. All your meals are going to be accounted for. You're going to go to a game. You're going to visit the academic center. You're probably going to meet some instructors or the head of the academic department. You're going to meet the whole coaching staff, and you're going to do all these things that the head coach, your recruiter, and your position coach has planned for you. And then you're going to have some free time. And within that free time, you're going to go to the game. You're going to be catered to. Everything is going to be carte blanche. You're going to be surrounded by bright lights, all the glitter, all the glamour, all the flash. And then there's going to come a point in time to where you're going to get a chance to hang out late into the evening. And at that point, it's going to be up to you to think about your future. Do you want to go party with the juniors and the seniors, or the athlete that's showing you around on campus? Are you going to go have 2, 3, or 4 drinks? Because this is what happens. And if you think this is the fun part, just know that the coaches find out everything. So at that moment in time, what are you going to be thinking about? Are you going to be thinking about having fun? Or are you going to be thinking about your future and handling your business and remembering that you're on a business trip? So remember, popular thinking sometimes means not thinking, because 98% of the kids that are on that recruiting visit, they're going to go party. They're going to go drink, and they're going to do whatever college kids do at that age. But we're talking about success here. We're talking about getting to a point where you master your circumstances. We're talking about getting to a point where you're the master of your own destiny. And for you to do that, for you to navigate the waters, you have to be a thinker. Popular thinking sometimes means not thinking at all. So then what happens when you don't get invited back to that school, or they don't offer you? Then you got to go back and think about it later, when you probably should have listened to this episode, made some notes, and put together a plan for your upcoming recruiting visits and how you're going to handle yourself from a business standpoint, not from a student standpoint, from a business. How do you handle yourself in business? Because that's what scholarships are. That's what letter of intents are. They're contracts, and contracts represent business. So you have to start thinking about business. You have to look at yourself as a businessman or businesswoman, and you have to conduct yourself accordingly. Remember, a letter of intent is a contract. When you sign on that dotted line for your scholarship, that's a contract. Contracts and agreements represent business. People, I don't want to destroy your hopes and dreams. I'm definitely not here for that. What I'm here for is to provide you information, knowledge, and wisdom to help you reach your hopes and dreams. But what I need you to remember is this: popular thinking offers false hope. Yes, I said it. Popular thinking offers false hope. Let me give you an example. There was this instructor at the University of Cologne overseas. His name was Bino Mueller-Hill, a professor at the University of Cologne in the genetics department. He explained how one morning in high school, he stood last in the line of 40 students in the schoolyard. Now, his physics teacher had set up a telescope so that his students could view a planet and its moons. And what happened was the first student stepped up to the telescope. He looked through it, but when the teacher asked if he could see anything, the boy said no. His nearsightedness hampered his view. The teacher showed him how to adjust the focus, and the boy finally said he could see the planet and the moons. One by one, the students stepped up to the telescope and saw what they were supposed to see, right? Finally, the second to the last student looked into the telescope and announced that he couldn't see anything. "You idiot," shouted the teacher. "You have to adjust the lenses." The student tried, but he finally said, "I still can't see anything. It's all black." The teacher looked disgusted, looked through the telescope himself, then looked up with a strange expression. The lens cap still covered the telescope. None of the students had been able to see anything. Many people look for safety and security in popular thinking. They figure that if a lot of people are doing something, then it must be right. It must be a good idea. If most people accept it, then it probably represents fairness, equality, compassion, and sensitivity, right? Not necessarily. People may say that there's safety in numbers, but that's not always true. So what I need you to do is think about what you think about. Think about it. Think about what you think about. And I'll be honest, sometimes it's painfully obvious that popular thinking isn't good or right. Other times it's less evident. For example, Consider the staggering number of people in the United States who have run up large amounts of debt on their credit cards. Anyone who is financially astute will tell you that's a bad idea, right? Yet millions follow right along with the popular thinking of buy now, pay later, especially college students. And so they pay and pay and pay. Many promises of popular thinking ring hollow. If you don't want to believe me, do your own research. I always encourage you to do your own research. Popular thinking brings only average results. It's the bottom line. Popular thinking brings mediocre results. I'll give you popular thinking in a nutshell. Popular thinking equals normal. Normal equals average. It's the least of the best and the best of the least. We limit our success when we adopt popular thinking. It represents putting in the least energy to just get by. You must reject common thinking if you want to accomplish uncommon results. You know what's popular? In the off season, you have high school athletes. And I'm specifically talking to high school athletes and football athletes. In off season, weight training starts. And let's say you're number 2 or 3 on the depth chart after the season ends. And your team is probably going to be doing strength and conditioning anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. If you're number 2 or 3 on the depth chart after the season ends and you're still training and you're training with your team, guess where you're going to stay at? You're going to be second or third on the depth chart when the spring, summer, and fall comes, unless you start thinking about other ways that you can get ahead, because there's going to come a time when you have to compound your work. If you get out of school at 3 and y'all train from 3:30 to 4:30 or 3:30 to 5 o'clock, what next? Are you going to get outside of your comfort zone and go train with a specialist that can help you enhance your Olympic lifting? Are you going to go train with a specialist that is a sprint trainer, not a speed, agility, quickness trainer, somebody that can really work on your sprint mechanics, that can really enhance your speed? Are you going to do that after you train with your team? If you're a quarterback, if you're second or third on the depth chart, are you going to go work with a quarterback's coach? If you're a receiver, are you going to go work on your hands? You see, at a certain point, you're going to have to do more. It's not okay to just do the work with the team. If you do that, you're going to stay where you are. And people are going to ask you why. Why are you doing that? Why are you training 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 to 6 times a week? Now, when you get asked that question, you should be able to answer it appropriately. And you should definitely know what your mission and you should know what your goals are. If you don't have a mission, or if you don't have goals or firm reasons to do what you're doing, you need to rethink what you're doing. Because to a degree, you have to be obsessed when you're trying to get to a certain level. You have to be obsessed when you're trying to be the best at what you do. You have to be obsessed with trying to be the best person that you could be. You have to be obsessed when trying to be a 4.0 student. You have to be obsessed with all of the small details. Everything is small details. So you got to think before you follow. So now that I got you thinking, as you begin to think against the grain of popular thinking, remind yourself that unpopular thinking, even when resulting in success, is largely underrated, unrecognized, and misunderstood. Unpopular thinking contains the seeds of vision and opportunity. Unpopular thinking is required for all progress. So the next time you feel ready to conform to popular thinking on an issue, stop and think. You may want to create change for its own sake, but you certainly don't want to blindly follow just because you haven't thought about what's best for you. As a student athlete, always think about what's best for you. Get those questions answered. Who, what, when, where, how, why. You have to ask questions. You have to question popular thinking. If everybody's doing something, that's a perfect time for you to do your own research and learn how to question why is everybody doing it and what are the benefits and what happens if you go the other way, if you take the road less traveled. So at the end of the day, you got to get used to being uncomfortable. You got to get used to asking the tough questions. You got to get used to asking questions that might offend people, not out of disrespect, but definitely out of respect. Get used to asking tough questions. You know, when it comes right down to it, popular thinking is comfortable. If you embrace unpopular thinking and make decisions based upon what works best and what is right rather than what is commonly accepted, know this, and I quote John Maxwell, "In your early years, you won't be as wrong as people think you are. In your later years, you won't be as right as people think you are. And all through the years, you will be better than you thought you could be. So when you think about your future, what do you see? When you think about your future, what do you hear? Before we close out, I want to share with you a story about habits, because habits influence our thinking and our thinking influences our habits. The good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. The reason that you don't do the right thing when you should is that you haven't established the right habits. So we'll talk a little bit about habits and how to establish the right ones. When you do the wrong thing, knowing it's wrong, you do so because you haven't developed the habit of effectively controlling or neutralizing strong inner urges that tempt you, or because you have established the wrong habits and don't know how to eliminate them effectively. It's important to recognize the truth. You always do what you want to do. Remember that. You always do what you want to do. Now, this is true in every act. You may say that you had to do something or that you were forced to, but actually, whatever you do by choice. Only you have the power to choose for yourself. So one of the secrets to be learned is how to develop the I want to at will. But what about hereditary tendencies? You may ask. Here's a story of how a man effectively protected himself against great possible harm. This is from a story that goes back to the mid-1940s. At a cocktail party preceding a Chicago Sales Executive Club meeting not so long ago, Bob was asked by a friend, "Do you want a scotch or a bourbon?" He smiled as he replied, "I don't want either. I don't drink." After a few seconds hesitation, Bob asked, "Would you like to know why?" The friend said he would, and Bob continued, "You know my father. Everyone knows him by reputation. He's been called a genius in his field of work. He is one of the finest men who ever lived. Yet my mother, who worships him, has suffered unbelievable agony because Dad is an alcoholic." Now remember, we're in the 1940s. Dad's income in some years has been as high as $50,000. Yet our family has often experienced financial need. But what was even worse, my mother would be tortured with humiliation, agony, and fear. He hesitated for a moment and then continued, "I love my mother. I love my father too. I don't blame him. But as a boy, I resolved that if a person as wonderful and smart as my father could bring such misery into his home because of his drinking habits, I would never drink. Why should I, his son, take a chance that I haven't inherited a tendency to be an alcoholic too? If I did inherit such a tendency, it couldn't harm me if I never took my first drink. And I never have. I'm sure you understand. Is there anything you can do about heredity? Yes, you can control hereditary tendencies. You can develop those that are desirable and neutralize those that are undesirable. You have the power to choose. Don't make the first step in the wrong direction. Don't deliberately begin a habit if the tendency towards that habit has proved to be harmful, especially in your family or amongst other teammates. Like Bob, don't take a chance. Just learn to say no. If you thought this was going to be some type of run-of-the-mill garden variety podcast show, you're in the wrong place. We're way past dry facts and dry science. What lies behind the Sports Mastery podcast show is my coaching program. My coaching program is designed to help the athlete reach their hopes and dreams, overcome pains and fears, and bust through all barriers and limitations. It doesn't take a PhD to teach confidence. It doesn't take a PhD to teach motivation. Every now and then, it's going to feel like I'm pulling teeth, but what I'm going to share with you is my high-level systems and strategies that I've used with Olympic-level athletes, Division I athletes, and NFL athletes. You can learn more about my high-level systems and strategies at sportsmastery.com/coaching. Get a free 1-hour complimentary consult. Visit that page and fill out the form.